Hey, Marlon, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks, Alan. Nice to see you.
Yeah, this is three times coming. I think I've been trying to get you on the show for like a year, and I keep having to reschedule because of illness or travel schedule. So I'm very grateful that stuck with me and the time to be on the show because I am super excited. I believe one of your study group members, and actually the one who reached out to me and said, "Hey, you got to have Marlon on." Because his story is really cool, but he doesn't talk about himself enough. And so I'm really excited to explore that. That was sort of my original note was study group member says, have Marlon on the show and just introduce your firm, the really cool stuff you're working on and how you're helping a lot of clients. So just to kick things off to sort of orient our listeners to you and your firm, can you just talk about like where your firm's located, how many clients you have, your niche, and then we'll dig in from there.
Sure. So technically, I guess my firm is located between Boston, Massachusetts, and Providence, Rhode Island. I'm actually on the border. I meet all my clients virtually. I think in almost 4 years now, I've only seen a client face to face once, and then she moved
Wow.
to Miami. So,
Okay.
my niche, I work with travel nurses and I help them navigate multi state taxation and kind of accelerate retirement savings while they're in a high income part of their career. Right now, I'm hovering around 60 households, some single and some couples. I have just under 200,000 in gross revenue. My monthly overhead depends on how heavily I'm advertising, but probably is around 2,800 a month in total. So that seems to be like a
Okay.
really comfortable spot for me right now.
And what year did you launch your firm?
So I had the fortune of launching my firm December 2019.
Oh, perfect timing.
Which was like, what's going on? So yeah, it was a stressful time in the Wesh household.
Yeah, I want to dig into that more. Let's talk about your sort of career path. It doesn't sound like you always knew you wanted to be a financial planner. You were in the military. Did you join the military right out of college or out of high school?
Yeah, so I joined the Marine Corps in December of 2008. I had about 2 semesters of community college under my belt at that time. Believe it or not, it was difficult for me to pay $750 a semester back in 2008. And I was like, I can't afford this. So I joined the military. I did about 8 years in the Marine Corps, some active, some reserve status. I did not always know that I was going to be a financial advisor. I kind of approach financial advising kind of the same way I approached my niche, just pragmatically. I knew that coming from the background I did, pretty poor. I remember going to bed as a kid with like winter coats and having kerosene heaters in the house because we couldn't like afford to heat the house and I knew that like I didn't want to be poor anymore. And so when I got out of the military and went to college, I essentially was looking for a career that had a high income potential. I know that's pretty different from a lot of XY planners that had like a real passion for helping people. And it's not that I
Mhm.
don't, but I was, coming first generation American, first generation college goer. Like I was trying to not go back to where I came from. And so that was a conscious decision. I did HR in the military. And that was fun. I enjoyed operations and I actually brought that into my niche. I think it's a big part of what's made me successful, if you want to call it that. But yeah, the financial advising thing, it was pragmatic. Like I needed a
Yeah.
career that could pay my bills.
Yeah, there's no shame in that. I think there's probably a lot of folks who forget why they got into financial planning. And it's like, I wanted to help people. And it's like, actually, I think you just really enjoyed numbers and you wanted to make good money. And you kind of developed the love for helping
It's
people. And
like
that's
not
okay.
every doctor can be like, oh, I just wanted to help all the people. Like, come on.
It is true. So you're in the military, you do 8 years, and then sort of what was your transition then into financial planning?
So yeah, so when I got out of the military, I think I was 28 or 29 when I was done. I had met my wife within 30 days of moving to my duty station in Massachusetts. And she made it very clear that she was not traveling the world with me. I'm like, all right, okay, cool. I like you enough. The Marine Corps was never like a thing I was going to do for the rest of my life. Again, it paid the bills. It took me from, really desperate situation into a place where I had health care. I was able to, have a place to stay, food to eat. It was stable. So then I went from there and I started applying for colleges in the New England area. Applied to some colleges in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and I initially, I think, applied for just like a general business type of program. And again, I was just doing research, just trying to figure out what type of degree would position me financially in an advantageous place. So I think it went from like general business to marketing, which is interesting. I probably should have stayed with marketing because I truly enjoy it. And
It's a
and
really
then
valuable skill set.
it's a very, very valuable skill set, And one of the things I say all the time to my professor friends is like, I don't understand how the business school doesn't mandate sales. Like, we had to take marketing classes, but like a sales class. How do you graduate
Mm.
business school and like not have a sales class? I took an elective, but it wasn't mandated. Anyway, so my school had just launched a wealth management concentration, which satisfied all the CFP requirements. So essentially, all I needed to do was take the test. And so that was attractive. It's like one of only, I think, three schools in the area. So it's like Suffolk University, which is my alma mater, Bryant University, which is in Rhode Island, and I believe Bentley is either Bentley or Boston College. I don't remember. So there was like only three universities at that time that had this program that was in sync with the CFP board.
So then what year did you graduate?
So I graduated my bachelor's in 2018. In
Okay.
2018, I had 1 year left of the GI Bill, which was great. So I just went straight to my MBA and finally finished that up in 2020.
Okay. But you launched your firm in 2019, you said. So
Yes.
what made you decide to launch your own firm versus going and getting a job in financial planning?
Yeah, so I had a coveted internship at Merrill Lynch, and I remember walking into the office and realizing that there weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And
Mm.
I know what it's like to be a pioneer. And it came to a point where I was like, I'm not really about that life. I don't want to be anybody's first. I don't want you to test out your inclusivity on me. It's
Mm.
just like I
That's a
just
great
didn't have
point.
an interest for it. And I'm slightly egotistical, and I probably thought like, oh yeah, I could do this myself. Blah, 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 blah. Truly, if I knew everything I knew now, I probably would have shopped around more for an independent RIA and see if I could join a team. But Merrill Lynch really turned me off to the whole thing. And I also worked for an advisor at Edward Jones. I was their BOA, their branch office administrator, and I figured I could do it on my own. I don't know if it's advisable, but it happened.
Yeah, Kitsis released some interesting research where it was talking about how we just assume successful entrepreneurs are more risk taking than sort of the general population. And it's actually not true. One of the highest correlations of success as an entrepreneur is overconfidence.
Mm,
Now, obviously, that can bite you as well.
sure.
I've certainly made those mistakes, but just believing in yourself, believing you can
Yes.
do it, even if you have no idea what you're doing, is actually way more impactful than actually knowing what you're doing but having no
Right.
confidence.
Right.
And
I will
so that,
say to this day, right now, I have less belief in my abilities than I did like 18 months ago. And it's so wild. Like I was talking to my wife. I said, like, why? So after I got out of college, my wife got pregnant and I was like, oh man, I need to find a job. So I actually worked in fundraising at my alma mater for about
mm,
a year. And so I had this whole idea, which, by the way, for anyone listening to this, I think this is a fantastic niche idea. I just didn't have the resource to really convert at that time. Because I was a fundraiser, I wanted to work with philanthropically minded people to help them meet their philanthropic goals, but also take advantage of all the tax advantages of planned giving.
mhm.
Like all the different type of charitable remainder trusts, all the different ways to give money to fund your retirement, to pass it on to your kids or what have you, and still meet your charitable goals. Fascinating, fascinating niche. When I was doing that, I was doing a lot of cold calling, and I just realized that the cold calling wasn't going to work. And so we could talk about that later. But so what was I saying about this? So yeah, I was talking to my wife, and I was like, why did I think that I was sophisticated enough. I knew like how to do it and how the trust worked and stuff like that. But why did I think I had the resources to like actually serve that population? It was truly
Mm.
bizarre. Like it's so glad that didn't take off.
You never know, and you get in with the right first early clients and you figure it out and suddenly it starts snowballing. So you started your firm with a different niche focusing on philanthropic individuals. So it sounds like you drank the niche Kool-Aid going into launching your firm.
Yes.
At what point did you decide to transition into the travel nurse niche?
Yeah. So it was again being pragmatic. I think as overconfident and the hubris that I have, one of the things that I think that a talent that I have is to really not drink my own Kool-Aid and realize that data is data. And you can have all your ideas that you want about what you want to do, but the market is going to tell you what is possible. It may not be forever, but at least right now at this point in time, the market will tell you whether what you're offering is something that is going to be accepted or not. So I was always listening to the market like, hey, something is missing. I think I'm personable enough. I think my messaging, I feel like I communicate well enough. What is the problem? Why am I not getting in front of prospects? And I would constantly ask myself that. I would constantly look to see like what was wrong about my whole funnel. I tested, put it out in the market, came back, tested, put it out in the market, and it just came to a point where it's like, I need to pivot from this. And I pivoted like two more times. The next one was first generation professionals. I figured like I'm a first generation professional, so I kind of know the ins and outs with it. But again, the market told me when you put out first generation professionals, you're going to get in front of college students because typically more seasoned people, whether they're first generation professionals or not, that's not what they call themselves on the internet, right?
Mm.
And I was wanting to work with somebody that was at least 7 years into their career, but that's not who I could get in front of. So I'm like, okay, it's not that I couldn't make it work, but I'm like, pivot again. What is an easier niche that I can explore and really use to my benefit? And it's just that constant testing, searching what the market is saying, and if it sucks, not taking it personally. It's like my message sucks. What sucks about it? How can I change it? I think that is probably one of the best skill set an advisor can have because I think we love our websites, we love our articles and blogs that we write and stuff like that, and we're so proud of the logo when we make our logo and we make the announcement, hey, I'm now working with so and so, and it's like, but does so and so want to work with you? Why do they want to work
Mm.
with you? I mean, this is a conversation for my therapist, but I was pretty ruthless with myself about like that I'm not special and I have to find something that people care about. It ain't me. It's what I'm talking about.
Hmm. That's a really good framing. How are you paying the bills at this time? Because it doesn't sound like you were getting a lot of client traction in those early years. Was your wife working, keeping the lights on?
I'm so glad you asked this question because I don't want anybody to be like, oh, Marlon is awesome. Like, how come I can't do it? I have a service connected disability. So I had at least like $2,000 a month coming in from the VA for my service connected disability. That was a big deal. My mortgage at that time, because the taxes went up a couple times, my mortgage at that time was just like 700 a month. So, at least with that, and then my wife's income, which is not much, a pediatric speech therapist makes about like 65 grand a year. And we live in Massachusetts, y'all. So it
Yeah.
doesn't go
Yeah,
far.
very high cost of
But
living.
yes. But I knew at least my mortgage would get paid. But it was bad for a minute. I remember at one point walking through my house and making a list of all the rooms that we weren't in all the time and a list of the furniture because I was like getting ready to sell furniture on Facebook Marketplace. We sold my wife's car because it was during the pandemic, so we were working from home. I'm like, this could buy us some time. So we sold my wife's car. We shared one car. It was rough. It was very, very rough. And it definitely altered my wife's and my relationship. It like tested it. Thank God we came out stronger on the other end. But it was a wild ride. And honestly, not something that I would recommend because it's a big gamble. It's a massive gamble, especially when you have kids. It was wild. Again, I'm crazy. Like, why did I think that? Yes, I should have worked with another firm. I should have worked with another firm. But I figured I'm a 30-something-year-old professional that I'm just starting my career. The only way that I'm going to catch up financially to my peers is if I have 100% ownership. That's the
Mm.
only way I'll make up for those 8 years that I spent in the military, which doesn't translate to like a civilian career. Like they're going to give you like all that time and seniority or what have you. That's just not realistic, even though people may get out the military with senior titles, but it doesn't always work that way. And so I knew that I needed ownership in order to make the type of money that I should have been making if I went to college at 18, graduated at 21, 22, and I started my career.
Yeah, I mean there are a lot of variables it sounds like that went into the decision to launch your own practice instead of going and getting a job. When you put them all together, it makes sense, right? It was a recipe that ultimately led to entrepreneurship and owning 100% of the firm versus getting a job. And getting a job in financial planning would have just taken you down a different path. You would have learned
Right.
financial planning maybe a little quicker because you would have had a
Mhm.
lot of clients, you would have had an existing structure, but also nothing can replace the experience of having been an entrepreneur. We have a lot of team members at XY and Advice Pay that are prior entrepreneurs, and I have an affinity for folks who have done it, success or not, just because you just develop just a whole different worldview, different understanding of how business operates when you've been through the fire. But you came out of the fire. It sounds like you didn't have to sell all the furniture in your house in order
No.
to, we were on the edge. And look, man, I get it. I remember finally getting paid for a one-time financial plan. And had I been paid like 2 days later, I was missing rent payments.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Oof.
here I am, and
Yeah.
like the money
Yeah.
came through and you paid the rent. And then like that kind of was like that turning point when things started rolling
Yeah.
the right direction. So was there sort of a turning point, a moment that you can remember when things just like all of a sudden light at the end of
Y-
the tunnel started feeling good?
Yes, yes, but it was short lived. So in December 2020 is when I first like started exploring the travel nurse niche. And then from January to March of 2021, I like boom, 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 like got like 13, 17-ish clients, like just like one after another. And I was like, yeah. And
All in this
then
new niche, in this traveling nurse
in
niche or
this
a different
travel
niche?
nurse niche,
Okay.
my calendar was filled. And then come May and June, a lot of those clients went away. And again, just like listening to the market, it was because at that time, my clients were making, on the low end, $6,000 a week. I had clients making $10,000 a week. Nurses,
That's
nurses.
300,000 to $500,000 a year. That's
Yes,
incredible.
yes, right? So, but what ended up happening was that first year of COVID, obviously in the wintertime, everyone's indoors. In the summertime, people are out. So everything started like, the cases were down, etc. So rates dropped for them. And
Mm,
because of that, a lot of them like dropped back. Travel nursing has been around forever, but the money that was before FEMA funds were injected, it was more around like 2,700 a week, which is honestly still fantastic for a nurse.
yeah.
I think on average, registered nurses make like, and this is probably on the high end of the average, like 65 a year. If
Mm,
you're somewhere like Boston or California or New York, then you're making 75, 80, 90. These are high costs of living, as well as these are places that have nursing unions. So there's collective bargaining that goes on there that a lot like other places like Florida, Georgia. I have tons of clients from the South because their wages are so depressed there and they don't have collective bargaining. So they
right.
travel to these other places to make their money that treat nurses better, etc. So there was a surge of nurses that started traveling nursing for that 8,000, 10,000 a week thing. And then when it went down to like 3,000, 4,000, they're like, I'm out, which is insane. But
Well, yeah, I
whatever.
mean, you start cutting expenses, which makes
There were a
sense.
lot of cars purchased, Alan. Like, I can't tell you. Anyway, yeah. So we had a surge of clients, and then a lot of them went out, and depression hit. It was rough until the fall again.
Okay. And then with cases going back up, sort of business started coming
Yes,
back in the door.
yes, yes.
So I made this assumption when you and I were first talking. I was like, "Oh, were you a traveling nurse or was your wife a traveling nurse?" And you said no, which this is like the quintessential niche that like, well, I experience this personally, so therefore I'm going to develop, I have an expertise in this. But, you don't come from this profession. Your wife doesn't come from this
Nope.
profession, and you pivoted into a couple different professions. So how did you find travel nurses as a niche and understand like there was a need there that, and you determined there was a willingness to pay, and just I guess that there was enough complexity to be able to build a business focused in this area?
Yeah, so it just went back to again my ruthless criticism of my product. And I realized again, because I'm not dealing with retirees, I felt like that would have been too slow to ramp up clients. I realized that for wealth accumulators that are young professionals that may be unmarried, that may not have children, there ain't a lot of pain that they're feeling. Like, it's more like, oh, I don't want to miss out this opportunity, so I know I should be saving. But it's not a lot of pain. It's not pain.
That's
It's
future
it's shame.
thinking.
It's
Yeah.
more like shame, right? Like I
Yeah.
should have. I should be doing. And so I just remember sitting at my desk and like, like there's got to be. I'm just like I'm closing my eyes and seeing my wife see me pacing around my office looking like a madman. But I'm like,
There has to
there
be a niche
has
somewhere. Yeah.
yeah, no, I have a okay. I have a cane that the previous owners of our house like just like left in the garage. It's just like an orthopedic like walking cane. And I walk around my office with it to think. It's just like a little fidget thing that I have. So I'm walking around my office like I need to find something that is not a nice to have, but it's a must have. What is something that everyone needs to do or else to get in trouble? Taxes. Okay. So
Always
then I go to
taxes.
Google. I'm like, what are professions that have complicated taxes? And then list came up, to like pilots, salespersons. There were a couple other
Probably business
ones,
owners.
business owners. There's like a whole list that came up, and it's like, what makes taxes complicated? Like with these people. So then, like, I just kept going to a new search, and essentially it came to like pilots traveling. Oh, that's what it was. It was like traveling salespeople because like that was a thing not too long ago. People were going all over the country doing sales, right? Like, and
Yep.
now we're just doing this, right? And then I believe travel healthcare professionals came up. And it was like a generic article, and it was like most of these travel people they work in several different jurisdictions, so they have to pay taxes and all these things. And I'm like, well, that's not that complicated. So I did some more research on like just what my assumptions were for the group. I think this is very important, and I tell advisors this all the time when they call me. You got to have guts about some of this stuff because a lot of advisors think if they talk to their target audience that they're like, oh, I don't want to talk to them yet until I have something like ready. But I read a book. Is it here? It is the best business book that I have ever read in my life. And I have read the Blue Ocean Strat. I've read business books. And a lot of business books have a lot of theory and aren't practical. Running Lean by Ash
Mm.
Moria is the very best business book for an entrepreneur. It is practical. There is no ego about it. It like strips you of all of that. So I had my assumptions. I had a list of assumptions that I made, like essentially in Avatar. I hate using that because I think a lot of people say Avatar and they say like it's aspirational versus actual what these people are.
Yeah.
And it's like for me, an avatar should be what the market actually says about them, not who you would like to work with. But anyway, so I had a set of problems that my assumption was that they had. And then I went to find where do these people gather? Where do travel nurses hang out? So I made a list of who I thought they potentially followed, like influencers that they potentially followed. Maybe it was Dave Ramsey, maybe it was Ramit Sethi, maybe it was Gary Vaynerchuk, maybe it was Grant Cardone or Robert Kiyosaki. Okay, and then I made another list of assumptions like what kind of titles they have. Okay, registered nurse, RN, BSN, like all the different ways that they could identify themselves online. What are the degrees that they had? What are the products they use? Do they buy Fit Scrubs, Cherokee Scrubs? What are the softwares that they follow? Meditech, what have you? What kind of associations they belong? The American Nurses Association. There are different types of nurses, right? So CRNA, nurse practitioners. So I just went to like all the different ways they could potentially identify themselves. And then I asked myself, okay, so where do they go for information? So I just went on Facebook groups, and I just put in travel nursing, and a whole bunch of different groups popped up. A lot of it was like, hey, I need an apartment. I'm going to Boston for 13 weeks. Does anybody have housing, etc.? But then I found a group of about 50,000 travel nurses where they came and shared information, asked each other questions like, is this a good rate for this area? I'm traveling to Seattle. What are some places I should stay out of, or places of blah, blah, blah. But what do you think about this healthcare system? Oh, don't go there. They have the worst operations. You don't want to go there. So there was a community. I found a community. And one of the best features, and I don't know if people do this, Facebook groups, is you can search keywords of the conversations people are having. So I just put in retirement. I put in taxes, because these are my assumptions now, right? That issues that they're having. But retirement, taxes, investing, passive income. Oh God, I hate that phrase, but I use it because that's what they're searching. And I think those were like the main. And then boom, all of these conversations with questions that these travel nurses were asking. Horrible answers they're giving each other. Honestly, scam like answers. Oh, just claim exempt. Claim that your taxes, your income is exempt. Blah blah blah. I had to help so many travel nurses. The worst story so far was a travel nurse that made like $283,000 in a year, and she claimed all that income as exempt. She paid $14,000 in federal taxes and ended up owing over $77,460. I will never forget that number. It like scarred me.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Fun little story. After I told her, like I had to take a little shot before I got on that call. That was wild. And I told her this information, and next thing I know, she bought a Range Rover. I'm like, I can't help you. We have to part ways. But this is the type of money that we're making. So,
Yeah.
so then I found that, and then I started going on Instagram because we were talking about young single women. So I knew that they were going to be on Instagram, which was also another challenge, right? Like I'm a guy that's DMing tens, hundreds of women on Instagram asking, can I get in front of you? Because now I had my assumptions. I saw the questions that they were having, and I made an interview sequence where it was very tailored. A lot of people, when they interview their clients, they ask their clients, what do you need? That's not how you do research. You have to have a hypothesis yourself and state it as a fact. Travel nurses face complexity because they travel to 4 to 5 different states a year, and they do not know how to do multi-state taxes. That's one. Travel nurses, because they switch different employers, they do not have a 401k that they can stay with all the time. That's another problem. Travel, like you stated as a fact, right? And so I said, like, I gave them a story. I told them, like, hey, I am starting something out for travel nurses, but before I even invest any time or effort in it, I want to make sure it's something that's valuable for you. So I have these questions that I believe are problems you have, and hopefully you can rank them in order or say it's not an issue. So I did that. That was a lot. That was like the last cold calling, if you will, that I've done in my career. But once I got those answers and I saw the trends of what they cared, I had a whole bunch of assumptions that they didn't even care about. There were just 3 things that they cared about. And boy, did I lean into that. I went into that group. I took a list of every single one of those questions, word for word, I didn't repurpose the questions in a way that made sense. If they was garbled or weird sounding, that is exactly how I pulled those questions, made videos answering those questions, and just posted it. Say like, I actually recorded this video a while back that actually addresses exactly what your question is. Let me know
Mhm.
what you think. And that's how it started. That's how it started.
This is just like a total masterclass in getting into a niche. I mean, like this is the hard work that you can put in, the effort that it takes, but ultimately this is how you discover, what the pain points are. Because we like to say, people when we say niche, they think profession. It's like no,
Right. It's
niche
the
is
pain
problem.
points.
It's the pain
Yes.
point. What's the pain point that I'm going to help someone solve, and who has that pain point? You went at a little different in that you were like, what's a pain point? Then you found a profession with that pain point. Then you went deeper in that particular profession. Say, okay, what's really specific to them? And then that probably hones your marketing messaging that you're still
Oh my
using
God.
today, which is
To
like, what is it going to take to get in front of these folks?
Alan, I haven't made any new content in over 2 years.
Hmm. So it just took that initial wave of great content, and that's it.
Do you know why? Because people are still searching the exact same way. It's the same questions they're looking up on Google, and they find it's the exact same questions. I'm not doing any like what's the Rothschild rate? Those are bullshit questions. Like I'll let Schwab's team answer that with their little thing. The only content that I made was those specific questions that I knew were geared to that. I repurpose. I have evergreen web, but it's the same thing. I probably should actually engage more on my Instagram now because it's social, right? Like I used to comment on all these nurses' pages and stuff like that, and then I haven't had to do it, but like I should do it. I could be doing better.
Well, I should is always a dangerous word
Right.
because we should on ourselves to say what we should be doing, but ultimately you built a successful pipeline, you built a successful business. You only need to market if you want to grow your business.
Right.
And so how are your new clients, if you get a call, or an email from a prospective client tomorrow, how do they probably find you at this point?
So I run Facebook ads to an evergreen webinar. I love organic reach, but I want to be able to predict how many people come to me. And I've gotten fairly
Hmm.
good at predicting that. Again, this webinar I have tested, this is probably version number 15. And I finally got to it where it's like this message is converting. And I pumped money into it. You know, Tim Cook kind of screwed me over. Now I can't target as specifically. Oh my God. I used to be a targeting god on Facebook. A lot of that stuff went away. So now I have to go like way broad and really
A
focus on
little bit more
copywriting.
generic, yeah.
But it's still fine. It's still fine. I would say the webinar won, but now because I was answering those specific questions, my name started getting passed around, right? So people started like sharing like my videos, and I was very smart. I DM'd a couple nurse micro influencers, right? If you've got a million people or whatever, it's too big. But if you've got
Hmm.
100, maybe no, like 15K, maybe 100K or what have you, and you have a platform, I was able to connect with like two micro influencers that got a lot of people to my Instagram. And then I connected with like three agencies, travel nurse agencies that were like, oh, people are talking about Marlon, Marlon, Marlon. So I did an interview like this. I popped that on my website as seen on, Travel Nurses Across America, ProLink, and gypsynurse.com, and blah, 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 blah. And I never do more than I need to. Right. So there's the inclination to be like, oh, I'm going to keep doing interviews and people are interviewing me and I'm important and blah, 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 blah. I did what I needed for the social clout, right? For those agencies. Once I got like four of those in a row, I'm not doing that. I did like a conference
Right.
with them, and I wrote a couple of guest blogs. That was it. Because like my time is important, and I want to make sure I'm doing stuff to grow my business, not just like grow my ego. So once I started getting that social clout, that other people were more receptive of me, something that burns me to this day because I perseverate over everything. Somebody saw my website, went into this group and was like, has anybody heard of Marlon Wesh? I guess he works with travel nurses, but I don't know. But somebody was like, never heard of him. You're better off doing your investing yourself, blah, 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 blah. And I was like,
Come on.
I'm like, you will know my name. But like my goal was to be the number one name when it came to financial planning for travel nurses. I believe I am at this point. If you search financial advisor for travel nurses or travel nurse advisor, I'm the number one thing. And I stole it from like three other people. There was like three people ahead of me. I mean, I don't know what I am now. I should take a look. But I remember just seeing, because I was, instead of just making these generic articles, like just
Mhm.
answering the questions. Oh, this is the other thing. The related searches on Google, those are your blog posts. It's magic. It's magic.
Yeah, I mean, you've put a lot of time and energy into sort of content into a content strategy, but it doesn't sound like it's taking nearly as much time now as it did 2 years ago when you sort of
No.
started into this niche. So, I'm curious, like, what are you building towards? Do you have a vision for what you want the business to be? Do you want to stay solo, with just a couple team members? Do you want to bring in other advisors, grow a big practice? Do you have a vision for what that's going to look like?
Yeah, I actually don't want to stay in financial advising because what I realize I love is building business. I
Mm,
love building businesses. I love systems. I have diagnosed generalized anxiety disorder. And because of that, to manage my life, I create systems so I can like live day to day. I do it out of necessity, not just because like, this is fun, but I'm good at it. It wasn't just the marketing part that I did really well. It was the operational part of my business and how I delivered the financial planning and positioned it, to the point where my close rate with prospects are like over 90%. If somebody says no to me by the time they get in front of me, I'm like shocked. I
mm.
probably can count on one hand how much that's happened since me really figuring out my niche. And I really enjoyed that. But then I realized when I had the clients that I needed to pay my bills and blah, 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 I'm like, oh man, it's not as exciting as the buildup. The buildup was
Mhm.
really great. So I'm actually pivoting. I'm going live in a week or so when I come back from Vegas. But I'm pivoting where I'm creating a marketing agency for financial advisors to kind of duplicate my system with
Mm.
them. I'm called the system the Niche Advisor Blueprint. And it's really data focused because I feel like there's a lot of marketing noise out there, but it's so focused on tools and tricks of the trade. It's like, should I be on LinkedIn? Should I be on Instagram? Should I be on TikTok? But in my mind, they're ridiculous conversations. In my mind, what advisors need to focus is on messaging. Because once you get your messaging, even on a less than optimal platform or what have you, it's gonna go to the people because that's what they're looking for. And a lot of people are looking for these like tools and tips. I started so bare bones. I did everything myself. I didn't invest any money into making anything pretty until I proved that it could be successful ugly. And so I think duplicating that it will allow me to really lean into like what my real talents are. So my goal is like year 7 to sell. And I don't expect to sell for much. If I could get 500 grand for my firm by then, I'm perfectly happy. I'm mainly a subscription with AUM on the background, but my clients, if they come to me with 50 grand, that's like a lot for a rollover. So it's mainly fee, it's mainly subscription billing. So the goal is like in 3 years to sell.
Okay. But I love that we're having this conversation because I think so few advisors are willing to make plans like that, much less articulate them and put it out into the world that that's sort of the direction that they're going. I get it. I mean, some of us are wired to build and get to product market fit, and going
Hmm.
from product market fit to scale is a different skill set. It's a different energy level. It's a different stress level, but that can be the real fun part for a lot of folks. I think the important thing is to know yourself, to put yourself in a financial position that can maybe lessen some of the scariness of the
Yes, I ain't
risk.
doing this again, Alan. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, it's easy to look back and be like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do the build, but I'm going to do it different. Where if it grows a little slower than I expect, whatever. Like I'm not worried about paying the mortgage,
Right.
and you've been able to do that by getting the firm built up to a certain point. So, do you think you'll stop taking clients then while you work on the marketing for the advisor marketing business?
Yeah, so we'll see. I've actually lost a couple households recently because the state of emergency COVID was called back, right? So that there's no longer FEMA dollars in the system.
Mm,
So a lot of nurses are leaving the bedside again and saying like, hey, I can't do this travel nursing anymore. But I think it's just like the business cycle. It's swinging back to what things were before COVID. And the
sure.
people that travel for the sake of travel will continue to travel. One of the things I'm not doing is lowering my prices. So things have slowed down so far as increase because I'm just not willing to do the work for what I was willing to do the work, 3 years ago.
Sure. Yeah, you want to be
Like,
able to
no,
make a
thank you.
certain amount of money per client.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, like no, no, no. So because of that, that certainly will affect it. I am willing to just kind of like do enough prospecting to maintain my caseload until the niche advisor takes over. I'm actually building. I'm really excited about this. It's like gives me the sweaty armpits because I'm going to be building this new business like live, right? So everything that I'm saying that I'm going to help advisors with, I am going to build the niche advisor just like that.
Hmm.
It's going to be kind of like a documented journey. Like I've got nothing posted on my socials yet or anything like that. So it'll be really exciting to say like, hey, I know this works because I've duplicated it X amount of times. So we'll see.
Very cool.
You might have
No,
to
that's
interview me
awesome.
in a little while if it fails.
Yeah, the beauty of entrepreneurship is that you get to build the things that you want to build. Like it's this expression of creativity. It's not some perfect science of like do
Right.
these things and you'll make this amount of money. People probably think entrepreneurs and business owners as they grow the business have a lot more flexibility and such than they actually do. But the one thing you always hold on to is that you have the ability and the right to build the business that supports your great life
Right.
and allows you to do the work that you enjoy. And I think that's so critical and something that we forget about. I think there are probably a lot of advisors out there, and I was one of them who built an advisory business and at some point was like, I'm not sure that being an advisor for the same 75 clients for the rest of my career is really where I'm at my
Yeah.
best. I could probably do it, but I don't think I'll be happy. I think I'll be happier
Right.
helping other advisors build their businesses, which is effectively the route you're going of like, hey, I think I'll be happier in startup world again, which is really fun
I
for
have a
some of
question
us.
for you, Alan.
It's stressful. Yeah.
My wife is as traditional gets. You go to school, you do well. She graduated salutatorian of her grad school. She's very smart, wicked smart, as we say over here. And you get a good job and you live your life happy. We have this debate all the time, and I'm curious what your opinion as an entrepreneur is. I feel there is less risk in being an entrepreneur than having a job because I feel like I could always find something to sell. And if
Mm.
I'm out of a job, I'm just out of a job. And I don't have anything to build on to be like, at least I know I have a skill set I can build on and I know how to make a marketing funnel. I know how to do this. I know how to do that,
Right.
that I'm not starting from square one. So like in my opinion, maybe it's just the way my head is wired. I think there's less risk personally for me being an entrepreneur than having a job, pissing my boss off and getting fired. What are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
I totally agree. I actually did an interview with Kitsis on his podcast back in the day. It was very early numbers, like 50, first 50. And it was all about my view on that starting my own financial planning firm was less risky than having a job. And it was because my last job, I got fired and it was
I
like,
totally
okay,
would get fired. I would get fired. Like
yeah,
I
just,
know like I would
well,
get fired.
and that was where somebody that had control of 100% of my income and there was nothing I could do about it. I just walked in on a Friday and was let go. I'd moved halfway across the country for this job.
Oof.
They're 6 months gone. And now part of that is I also had to recognize it for myself. Many times, the rate of mental health diagnoses and neurodivergence, in my case being ADHD, the rates are much higher for entrepreneurs. And it's not because that's what makes you a successful entrepreneur. It's because
Sure.
entrepreneurship is the only way to build a job that sort of caters to the way our brains are wired. And so for me, that's the part that gets lost is
Yeah.
that, yes, I can go, my dad has been a career guy. He's had, once he found his spot, like he's been with like two different businesses over 40 years, it seems like, and he's wired to be a W-2 employee. And that's awesome. There's no shame in that. I was just not. And so like I can go get a W-2 job and I will make it 6 months. And so the risk for me getting a W-2 job is significantly higher than entrepreneurship just because, it gives us the ability to, I think, to create. And to your point, once you have a certain skill set, then it's hard to imagine that if something's not working, you can't pivot into something that will work, even if it's not quite
The
ideal or
same
not as
thing.
much money as you're
Yes.
engineering. I think you have to look at risk differently. And my view is always, I'd rather have 50 clients, and if one person fires me, I lose 2% of my income, versus
Right.
if one person fires me, I lose 100% of my income.
Right.
That is not to understate the stress that comes with building a business.
Sure.
I don't know if you can see on video, I got a lot of gray hair here and gained some weight and didn't have the best health for a long time from building a business. However, that was a price I was willing to pay to be able to create. And the last thing I'll say is, like, I was talking to Carl Richards about this recently, where he was saying, like, you could just stop. Like, you've hit a point, just sell the businesses, you could just stop. And I said, isn't it interesting how he's also a believer that entrepreneurship and starting a business is really this expression of creativity. And we never go to the painter and say, you should just
Just
stop
stop.
painting.
Right.
Like, you're done. You created 3 great paintings. Like, just be done. Like, no one ever thinks about
Yeah.
that. And yet, like, as business owners, we're always told when you go to start a new thing, just stop. You're fine. You got enough money. It's okay. And it's like, I can't. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And
I
that's okay.
That is so interesting. I'm looking at my desk over here. I have a consult because I think I've gone undiagnosed with ADHD my entire life.
Mhm.
And so I'm looking forward to my intake and to see about that, because you mentioned like lasting 6 months. Mine is like a year. I've always told myself I could do like hard things for at least 3 years. I think as I get older, that's short. Like a
It's
year
so true.
max, a year
Yep,
max.
less.
But like, yes, this has allowed me to create a life where everything that's quirky about me, I can make it work for me
Mhm.
instead of having to. Of course, I do mask, but like having to mask 24/7. I was in a Starbucks the other day, and a woman was doing a Zoom call, professional woman, and I was hearing her conversation. She did the laugh, the corporate laugh, and I know the laugh. I know it's like, you got me there, Bill. And she did it, and I was like, oh, I do not miss that. I do not miss that. And like, it's just like 24/7
So true.
masking.
Listeners may know my story, but yeah, I was undiagnosed. I was homeschooled my whole life, so they never
Hello, me
tested.
too.
Okay, well, there you
I
go.
was
That's why we weren't
homeschooled all the
tested.
way until college.
Yeah, same. So I went second grade through 12th. And yeah, so they don't test homeschoolers for ADHD. And I actually saw it in my son, who's now, gosh, how old is he? 8, about to turn 9. And I started to see some of those. I was like, oh, I bet people would think that's ADHD and that he's a mirror of me. And so I
Mm,
went and got diagnosed, and so that I could better understand how to equip him with some of those tools that I was lucky enough to develop, because not everybody has some of the privilege that I had in terms of developing that. Like all things, it's your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. And
right.
if you learn how to harness it, it's really powerful. But you have to be willing to say no to a lot of things, to be
Oh,
told by a lot of people, you're an idiot, you're building
yeah,
things wrong. When I left my first job, people would be like, it's the golden paycheck. Like, what? This is the golden opportunity. How could you ever leave that? I was like, it just doesn't feel right.
yeah,
And that was so hard, where it's like, entrepreneurship is very much getting out of a warm bed and putting your feet on a very cold concrete floor and then standing there for a long
yeah.
time. And it's like, man, those covers were warm, but it didn't meet the needs. It didn't meet it didn't make me happy. And I think, as advisors, we have the opportunity to build our own great life, and whatever that means for you. So
Ooh, all of that resonates. All of that resonates so much.
that's awesome. Well, listen, as we're coming up on our time, this has been such an amazing conversation. If there's one piece of advice that you could go back and give your younger self, one thing that you've learned that you wish you had known 5, 10 years ago, whatever the date range is, maybe this is when you were thinking about starting your own firm. What do you think that advice would be?
Oof. I think it would be don't offer too much. You were
Mm,
talking about just a second ago about having to say no. That has been the theme for my past 6 months. Boundaries, saying no, and I would have told myself you're going to be okay the less you do, not the more you do. And it's so counterintuitive, but like I thought by just offering this and doing this and that, like it would make me more valuable in front of potential clients. I think what I would say is do less, don't invent anything, repurpose what exists, and always follow the data. Just follow the data, not what you would like. You know, I think that would have helped me be less stressed about like, oh, I'm not worth my fees. Because the most successful advisors I know offer like so very little to their clients. You know,
mhm.
on paper. And I think simplicity really helps people stick with the course. And that's what I've told myself.
I love it. I love that advice. Well, Marlon, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your story and what you're working on. By the time this episode goes live, you will have launched your new marketing agency. So we'll have to check that out, and excited to keep an eye on your progress and what you're building. So thank you for the time today.
Thanks, Alan. This was an awesome conversation. Love being here.